With another wave of attacks on Ukraine, the country's retaliation on the Russian shadow fleet, and Andriy Yermak's resignation ahead of the peace negotiations in Washington, D.C., it's time to discuss the latest from Ukraine with my today's guest, Mark Toth, co-founder of Intrep 360. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Good evening, Claudia. Thank you.
So Andriy Yermak is actually going to join the ranks on the front line. Your assessment of such move by him, is it safe? Is it actually a move to save his political career? Has it been well calculated? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's an act of desperation on his part to retrieve his reputation. Whether or not it works or not, time will tell. As I was mentioning earlier to several colleagues, if he is found guilty of these charges or faces these charges, his political career likely will not be resurrected. It also remains to be seen whether or not Ukraine is willing to have someone who's played such a major role in Zelensky's government on the front lines, potentially to be captured by the Russians, and all of the information, intel, and any insight he might have about future Ukrainian negotiating positions and war plans. That just may be a bridge too far. So he may say he's going to the front lines. I get why he wants to pull a Winston Churchill here and reinvent himself in the eyes of the Ukrainian people. But I'm not so sure he's going to end up on the front lines. Time will tell.
And how do you think Yermak's resignation and his moves now are going to affect Volodymyr Zelensky, especially in this very particular point in time when the future of Ukraine depends on what's going to happen in days and weeks to come?
It's a great question because it is tricky. In the long term, it probably helps Zelensky. Yermak was not a popular man in Washington, whether you talk to Democrats or whether you talk to Republicans. They thought he was abrasive and that he was not conducive to having meaningful discussions as opposed to just pushing Ukraine's points on people trying to find some type of compromise. So I think in the long term, it helps. However, in the short term, this probably comes at the worst time for Ukraine because it is facing challenges on the battlefields on the Donbass. It is facing challenges diplomatically because of Trump's peace framework, and it's playing into a Russian narrative right now, especially Kira Dmitriev, one of the authors of this peace plan that's being negotiated in Miami right now. The Russian head of their sovereign bank there, he's a guy that's using it to say, hey, look, Ukraine is corrupt. So in the short term, it really hurts. This is not a crisis that Ukraine needed at this moment, but it's here, and unfortunately, they're going to have to overcome it.
And do you think that Ukraine can actually afford more resignations, especially when it comes to top aides, top ministers? What's your opinion?
In the long run, they can't. Look, they have absorbed resignations in the past. The United States, going back to our own Revolutionary War, we survived Benedict Arnold, betraying the country and the treason that he committed. Countries at war can do this, and I'm confident that Ukraine can. Again, though, personally, I would rather see them focusing on prosecuting the war, getting it done, as opposed to looking at these things internally, because they distract from the top leadership of the country, Zelensky and his generals, from staying focused on how to make sure that Russia doesn't win this. But I'm confident that they will survive it.
Mm-hmm. Let's move to the attacks now. We've had an update on what's happened to Kyiv overnight. Many people injured, some were left dead, half a city left without electricity. What message is Russia sending as of now by having those intensified attacks, especially when it comes to the capital, when peace talks are in motion?
Right, Claudia, it's the same message that Putin has always sent whenever he negotiates with Putin or he perceives that there's a critical moment where the Ukrainians are negotiating with Team Trump, if you will. And it's a message that, look, I'm going to attack you. I don't care if civilians are involved. He wants to put an exclamation mark on his maximalist negotiating positions. This attack last night, 596 drones, some of those were decoy drones, 36 ballistic missiles, did indeed knock out half the electrical power. Now, 360,000 people have been restored to power, but it sent a big message. And it wasn't just to the Ukrainian people that this war is going to continue. He's signaling to Trump that unless I get everything that I want, and so far your plan doesn't give me everything that I want, this war is going to continue.
So we've seen that Ukraine actually had a response. There was an attack on 2 oil tankers on the Black Sea using underwater drones. According to latest information, there has been no oil loss, but that's a clear signal that Ukraine is sending to Russia. We're looking at your oil industry that is going to actually hurt your coffers. Do you think that this action, yet another action by Ukraine of targeting not the civilian population, but targeting the infrastructure, the refineries, the tankers, is actually going to make Russia think twice about what their next move, their next step when it comes to attacking civilian targets?
Yeah, one would hope. It certainly is putting pressure. It's the best sanctions that, absent European and U.S. sanctions, secondary sanctions, if you will, on those oil fleets that Ukraine can do. And certainly there is messaging here that Ukraine is now willing to go after this shadow fleet, as they should. I mean, General Ben Hodges has been on TVP World, has called for that as well, and I concur with him, that these things have to happen, that you can't keep allowing Russia to get economic revenues, if you will, from selling of oil, only to turn around and use those to attack Ukraine in terms of funding drones and the like. So hopefully that it will. I think Ukraine needs to do more. It's not going to be enough, though, to be a tipping point. It's not enough to change, at this point, Putin's cost calculus. That's going to have to come at the hands of Europe, frankly, because the U.S. seemingly is not willing to do that yet with something like Tomahawks. But I think Europe can change that if they are willing to do something like a no-fly zone over Western Ukraine. But these attacks in and of themselves are helpful. They should continue. They're doing great damage. They're pressuring the Russian economy greatly. It's causing oil revenues to decline substantially, especially through the Black Sea. And so by all means, they should keep doing it. But more is going to be needed to change Putin's cost calculus if he's going to change his tact at the negotiating table.
According to some of the latest news when it comes to the front line, we know that unmanned system forces blew up $60 million worth of Russian air defense systems in 3 days. As we're looking at Russia on the front line, do you think we're getting to a point in time where this could also possibly change the dynamic of the peace talks, or are we too far off yet? And as you mentioned before, we will have to see some more action from Europe and from the U.S.
But it's going to take more action because, look, the front line still, for the most part, and I'm speaking in terms of a material assessment here, are pretty stationary. Russia is making some gains, but Ukraine and its armed forces are being very clever here. Sometimes they're gaining territory only to do counterattacks to entrap the Russians, and they've done that in the Donbass. Russia wants you to believe that they're making greater progress than they are. Like in Kupiansk, Putin has said several times that he controls it. That's not the case. In the north there, near the Russian border, Ukraine's been able to push back. And so from that standpoint, I share the Institute of Study of War's opinion, their assessment here, that Russia simply isn't in a position yet to maneuver, to take wide areas of ground in the east, even though Putin thinks that he can. And likewise, though, on the similar front, Ukraine isn't in a position to maneuver either. That means to push forward forces past the front line. So I think for the most part, aside from some loss of kilometers, not tens of kilometers of territory in the east, it's pretty much still a static war, and that it's going to take some game changers from Europe, like I said, in terms of a no-fly zone over Western Ukraine, in order to allow the armed forces of Ukraine to push assets up into these front lines. Until that happens, I think you're going to see a pretty static front line.
Thank you, Mark. That was Mark Toth, co-founder of Intrep 360, joining me here on the program. Thank you once again.
Pleasure. Good evening to your viewers.
Thank you. And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. Thank you for joining me on the program. And please do stay tuned here on TVP World for more news and features coming up in just a moment.